Changing fortunes, new patterns of wealth, in association with Coutts.
This is Bernardo Paz. He's made a fortune from Brazil's commodity boom.
I went to the top of the mountain in the beginning, and I saw all the mountains, and everything around is natural. It was beautiful, At 5 o'clock in the morning, you sit there and you can see the workers coming to work. And the first dynamites explode. All my money comes from the mine.
In the 21st century, patterns of wealth around the world are changing dramatically. This is the story of the new wealthy in a globalized world. In this series, we get unprecedented access to some of the innovators, entrepreneurs, and speculators whose fortunes have flourished over the past 2 decades. The dramatic rise of the Chinese economy over the last few decades has had a profound impact on those countries with mineral resources. China now consumes almost half of the world's key mineral ores and is the second largest producer of oil, only beaten by the United States. In this episode, we meet 2 entrepreneurs who, in their different ways, have taken advantage of this to create great wealth. Africa. 20 years ago, many of its countries were floundering. While Asian economies roared ahead, Africa seemed mired in poverty and debt. Slowly but surely that changed. As China has boomed, Africa, rich in natural resources, benefited from a surge in demand for its minerals. Nigeria, sitting on generous reserves of oil, first saw the effects some 15 years ago. Riding on the back of that growth is a new generation of entrepreneurs like Wale Tinubu, whom Forbes magazine called the King of African Oil.
I had no doubt that I was going to succeed. It's never been an issue in my mind. We have the largest fuels distributor in the country. We do close to $2 billion in just selling fuel via petrol stations. We have a target of achieving 100,000 barrels a day production and 300 million barrels of reserves. And when I used to say this 3-4 years ago, people didn't believe it was possible.
Wale Tinubu is the founder and CEO of Oando PLC, Africa's largest indigenous integrated energy company, with a market value in the region of $1 billion. Coming from a middle-class family, his parents had a very different career in mind for him.
They invested heavily in education. I mean, they sacrificed everything else to send me and my brothers out to university abroad. So my logical path was to qualify first as a lawyer, which I did. I've always liked, the thought of being able to make a return, to make money. And I've always looked at it from the point of view of saying, you need to take a risk.
Even when he was studying law in the UK, his flair for doing a deal was evident.
One of the risks I took was getting my school fees, and instead of paying it in, a friend of mine had said to me he knew somebody in Germany who was selling BMWs that were being released. It was a new model, and if we went out to Germany and paid him, we could get the cars and sell them for a big premium in the UK. Probably was about £1,000 profit, but my school fees was £3,000 a year, and £1,000 profit effectively was one term's fee. So you can imagine how much money that was in those days. And we did that. We did it several times. And by the time we did it, the 4th or 5th time, we had crashed our own markets.
He qualified as a lawyer, but he found the work uninspiring.
I practiced law for 2 years. And I said to myself that I want to be on the other side of the table, not on this side. Talent, I suppose I've had, which is the ability to spot an opportunity.
The opportunity came when one of Wale's friends was in desperate need of a ship to take fuel out to the offshore fishing fleet. Wale knew of a ship that might be suitable.
I went on this canoe, and the tide was so bad because we had to go offshore to the vessel. And, I had no life jacket on or anything. And I was asking myself, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? This is crazy. It's almost getting dark and I'm going to drown, And I saw this vessel bobbing in the water and I just knew that this was destiny for me. It was an old leaky tanker called the Carolina, a 1945-year-old vessel. When the tide was against her, she would do negative speed sometimes, but she'll get to her destination.
The age of the vessel wasn't the only problem he faced.
The crew were almost going on a mutiny anyway, because they felt they'd been abandoned by their owners. And they borrowed some money the next day, went back, gave them enough money, and then started gaining their confidence.
This first deal had whet Wale's appetite, and he quickly discovered that bigger profits could be made, not in shipping to the fishing fleets, but to the oil refineries. Over the next few years, his sole focus became breaking into the sector.
I really like music, and I like the most, whatever is like the latest song or record. I kept asking my friends, that song sounds nice, Is it just come out? And they said, no, where have you been? It came out 2 years ago. And I suddenly realized that for a 2-year period of my life, I actually had no social life while I was, building the business.
Despite the personal sacrifices, Wale worked hard to grow the business.
As we grew the company from 1 ship to 7 ships, what I learned first and foremost was credibility. Everybody who we dealt with used to say that, for a Nigerian company to say they're going to deliver fuel at 2 o'clock and deliver it at 5 to 2, you know what I mean? This is so good. And the reliability factor spread. And before we knew, we had more clients that we could deal with.
The hard-won credibility Wale had achieved was instrumental in their successful bid for a major asset being sold by oil giant Exxon. But their new employees were worried that the incoming owners were too young and inexperienced.
We had all sorts of issues. We had people demonstrating. They just saw it as a threat in terms of a new management coming in and not knowing what to expect. So it took us time to settle things down, get them to gain their confidence, which we did, and then eventually, go on to start growing the business.
In 2003, Wale rebranded his business as Oando PLC, and soon they became the largest fuel distributor in Nigeria, with annual sales of around $2 billion. Over the next few years, they began to diversify into every sector of the industry, from power generation, gas pipelines, and most recently, into oil production.
Whatever we did was pioneering, or just being ingenious in the ultimate aim of creating more value and wherever it came from. And that's effectively how we evolved.
Whilst instability still blights many countries, Africa as a whole started to see pronounced economic growth 15 years ago, just as the commodities boom took off. Wale, who went into business in 1998, certainly saw the effects.
When I started doing business, Nigeria was a $30 billion or $40 billion economy. Now it's a $350 billion economy. That it's time to provide for ourselves, and it's also creating an element of entrepreneurship in which people are now having to build businesses to satisfy, to create economic wealth, create jobs, create opportunity.
From the colonial period onwards, Africa's resources have largely been exploited by foreign companies, mainly staffed by expatriates. In contrast, Wale prides himself on persuading talented Nigerians to leave well-paid jobs in the West and come home. He employs around 1,500 people, and over 95% of them are Nigerians.
I would exhaust all possibilities of hiring a Nigerian into a position before I sought to hire a foreigner. We should maximize our local opportunities and in the process build indigenous capacity.
It's not only Africa that has benefited from China's growth. Over the last couple of decades, many other countries blessed with natural resources have also done nicely. And then there's Russia. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the country's industries were sold off to a handful of individuals. Many of them became billionaires and remain so today. The richest 100 Russians own a staggering 20% of the Russian economy between them.
All these billionaires